And we got one quick Aaron Rodgers update, and that's it. No more Aaron Rodgers talk rest of the show. According to Mark Caboli, Rodgers will not be announcing his signing with the Steelers at Pat McAfee's live show in Pittsburgh, which is scheduled to be tomorrow, April 9th. We're sitting here Tuesday, April 8th. Aaron Rodgers still hasn't signed. The McAfee Big Night Out live show is tomorrow on Wednesday. And, we've been talking over the last couple weeks. We've been speculating that Rodgers has something schemed up that he's going to surprise everyone. He's going to make the big announcement at the live show. But Mark Caboli, who is the Pat McAfee Show Steelers correspondent, is saying that it's not going to be happening. So that was initially tweeted by Andrew Filipponi, and Caboli followed it up on his own tweet where he was responding to fan questions, and someone asked him about, what are the chances that the Rodgers thing, the McAfee Show, that whole situation happens. And Caboli said, according to my sources, I have no idea. Even though I have no inside knowledge at all, there's no way he shows up unless he officially signs before Wednesday at 8 p.m. People are convinced that Rodgers is going to show up like it's a WWE event and drop a pipe bomb promo and officially make the announcement. I just don't see it. So we'll know if Rodgers is a Steeler before the live show, is essentially what he's saying. Rodgers would be handling it in a professional and classy manner by doing so. He's not going to leave everyone in the dark and just surprise not only the fans, but also the Steelers organization by announcing it at McAfee. So there you go in terms of Aaron Rodgers updates there. Even though in a way it's still not an update because Caboli isn't like 100% confirming that Rodgers isn't going to do that tomorrow, right? He's not confirming 100%. He's just, from his knowledge, his sources, and his sources are pretty good, at least from the McAfee Show standpoint, right? He doesn't think it's going to happen. Rodgers is going to have to sign before going live or making the appearance at the live show in Pittsburgh. So there you go. Now let's get to more exciting stuff. We got mock drafts that we're going to be reacting to in regards to the Steelers pick at 21. And actually there's two mock drafts. One is the Mel Kiper mock draft. He did a 2-round one. And then there's another one from CBS Sports. They did a full 7-round mock. And I'll tell you what, this may be the worst mock draft I've ever seen from a Steelers standpoint. I don't know how you could make it possibly worse. The guy that was doing this exercise had to have been a Browns fan or a Bengals fan or something, because I feel like he almost has the Steelers getting worse after the draft. It's so bad. It is terrible. But we'll do those mock draft reactions, and then some draft visit news we just got within the last hour or two. We'll talk about at the very end. But first, let's do the mock drafts. Do we want to start with the Kiper mock draft, which I'm not saying it's amazing. What he has the Steelers picking at 21. It's not amazing, but we'll say that's the good news. Do we want to get to the good mock draft first, or do we want to get to the bad mock draft first? Do we want to get the good stuff out of the way? Or the bad stuff out of the way before we get to the good stuff? Let's start with Kiper. We're going to do Kiper. It's because it's a little bit less involved because he only did a 2-round mock draft, so he only has the Steelers taking one player because obviously we don't have a 2nd-round pick because of the DK Metcalf trade. So here is who Mo Kiper has us picking in round 1. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon. We stay at 21. No trade-ups, no trade-backs. His explanation is Harmon is a constant headache for opponents. He had 5 sacks and 35 pressures as an interior pass rusher last season and took care of business in the run game with 11 stops and 10 tackles for loss. Keanu Benton and Harmon would be a good pairing inside. Agreed. Says, I originally had Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart to Pittsburgh. He throws with accuracy and velocity, and he'd be a potential short and long-term answer. We're all still waiting to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers, so I'll hold off on any quarterback moves for the Steelers until we know a little bit more. That's fair. I mean, we could still take Jackson Dart. We could still take a quarterback even with Rodgers, even though if Rodgers decides to come here, I think it does become a little less likely. So, fair assessment there from Kiper. But the Derek Harmon pick. Now, we've talked about our top two needs heading into this draft are really interior defensive line, defensive tackle, and running back. When you're talking about just filling out your roster and not having any glaring needs for when we start the season, week 1 of 2025. Now, quarterback, that's the other. We just don't have certainty at the position right now. I do think most of us would be good with Mason Rudolph as the starter for 2025, which leaves us less pressed to try to draft the quarterback in round 1 or draft a quarterback early in this upcoming draft. So I think it's DT and it's running back in terms of even running back though. Honestly, we could live with our defensive line we got now on paper, even though it's a very similar defensive line to what we had at the end of last season. Just minus Ogunjobi, but we added Daniel Aquale. And then at running back, depends on how you feel about Jaylen Warren being a majority type of running back, where he's getting the majority of the carries. Can he take over a backfield and get 75% of the snaps? Depends on how you feel about Jaylen Warren in that regard. Because some are saying that no matter who we draft, Jaylen Warren is going to be getting the majority of the carries. So, we don't need a running back in round 1 then, if that's the case, especially with us also picking up Kenneth Gainwell and us not cutting Cordarrelle Patterson. Like, we actually have 3 running backs on the roster. It's the most optimal 3 running backs? I like Warren and Gainwell. I think we could definitely do better than Cordarrelle Patterson at this point. But I'm just, maybe Steelers are in a better spot than what we actually think in round 1, where we, even though I think we all would agree D-line running back would probably be the top 2 needs. Maybe I guess my point is they're not as glaring as we make it seem when you actually look at our roster on paper. Again, on paper, because the execution of what our roster was and how it all played out last year, yeah, we need D-line help. But if you look at Keanu Benton, Cam Hayward, Daniel Aquale, DeMarvin Leal being healthy, I think we could work with that. We can. But at this point, the state of the Steelers, we can't be just saying we could work with that. We need to really shore up that defensive line and not let what took place in the wild card game against the Ravens happen again. So anyway, that's why defensive tackle is seriously being talked about for round 1. And with us taking Derek Harmon, we address it. I'm good with taking Derek Harmon. Could we have made a better pick though? Could we have picked a better defensive tackle? Yeah, because whenever I was looking at the rest of Mel Kiper's mock draft, Walter Nolan went a few picks later. Kenneth Grant didn't go to the second round. I was getting criticized for my mock draft 1.0 whenever I traded back and had the 32nd pick and was still able to pick Kenneth Grant. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, this isn't happening. This ain't a realistic mock draft at all," because Kenneth Grant is going to be gone potentially even before we pick at 21. How are we going to get Kenneth Grant at 32? You mean to tell me you're trading back, you're getting the 32nd pick and an extra pick for day 2 and getting Kenneth Grant? This is unrealistic. People were crapping on me for that. Meanwhile, Mel Kiper, the ESPN draft guru, right, has made a living off of covering the draft for the last 20, 30 years, has Kenneth Grant going in the second round. So maybe I wasn't too unrealistic in my scenario of still being able to get Kenneth Grant at 32. But would we rather just get Kenneth, like in this scenario, say the Steelers stay put 21, Walter Nolan's there, Kenneth Grant's there, even Jackson Dart. Now, he alluded to this in the second part of his explanation that he was going to go Jackson Dart initially to Pittsburgh, but he had him going to the Rams at 26. So Dart was still on the board. Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant. Shedeur wasn't there. He went to the Saints at 9. In terms of running backs, Genty and Omarion Hampton went early, so all the other running backs are available. But most of those guys, people are considering day 2 picks and so on, like Judkins, Henderson, the Ohio State running backs, and then like Giddens, Sampson, Caleb Johnson from Iowa. Those are more like day 2 picks. You don't have to draft them at 21. They still are probably going to be there in the second round, but we don't have a second round pick. So that's the other thing. But that's why the whole trade back is such a good thought process at this point. If the board looks like what Kiper is projecting, Walter Nolan's still there at 21, Kenneth Grant's still there at 21, Derek Harmon's there at 21. You could probably trade back in the first, and one of those dudes will be available, and you're able to get maybe a late second round pick or a third round pick in the process to make up for the one that you lost in the DK Metcalf trade. I would say this, though. If we are just going to stay put at 21, and this is the board, I would rather just take Kenneth Grant. And I've said that. If we got the option between all those defensive tackles, I think Kenneth Grant is what we need. I think he's better in run stopping. I think his body type, his role, his niche on the defensive line is more of what the Steelers need right now, as opposed to Derek Harmon. Now, Derek Harmon or Walter Nolan, they could play. They could be utilized and they can have impact. Don't get me wrong. But again, I'm just thinking back to the days when we had Casey Hampton. We had that type of dude in the middle, clogging up gaps, stopping the run, just absolute beast. That's what Kenneth Grant could be for us over the next decade. So that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking with taking Kenneth Grant over Derek Harmon. So that's my reaction to Mel Kiper's, and obviously we didn't have a second round pick. He doesn't have us like trading into the second round or doing anything like that. So that's that. Mel Kiper, 1 pick for the Steelers, 21, Derek Harmon. Not the end of the world. Again, in terms of like deciphering or judging between these 2 mock drafts, this Kiper one, I wouldn't go all the way and say, oh, it's amazing, it's great or anything. But I think between the 2, it's the good one. So we got the good one taken care of. Now let's get to the bad news. Let's get to the bad mock draft. And this is a full 7-round mock draft done by CBSSports.com. The writer, let me get his name. Let me give him some credit here. Although, I mean, he completely botched up the Steelers picks here. I don't know how much credit we should be giving him, but the fact he put in the work for a 7-round mock, we'll give him a name drop. Chris Trapasso. No, not Trapasso. Trapasso. Chris Trapasso from CBS Sports. And here's what he has the Steelers doing. It's the same pick. It's the same guy. But look at how the Steelers get him. It's egregious. We're not picking at 21 anymore. We trade up. We trade up from 21 to 19 to take Derek Harmon. So we swap with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And again, Derek Harmon, not a bad pick. It's not the end of the world if we take Derek Harmon. I think it would be a nice pick. But would I prefer Kenneth Grant? Yeah. Derek Harmon versus Walter Nolan. Maybe that's more of a toss-up. Walter Nolan, more athletic. Maybe a little bit more of a risk. But, I mean, you can't go wrong with any 3 of those defensive linemen. I would prefer Kenneth Grant, but is what it is. What makes this so bad, though, is we trade up to get Derek Harmon as opposed to just in Mel Kiper's mock draft, just sitting there at 21, and we take him. And the trade scenario, we give up our 3rd-round pick to move up these 2 spots. And also our, what would that be? 185. Our 5th round, what is that? No, our 7th-round pick. Our 6th-round pick. I'm sorry. Because 123 is 4, 156 is the 5th-round pick, 185 is our 6th-round pick. We trade our 6th-round pick and our 3rd-round pick to move up 2 spots and take Derek Harmon, a dude that was probably going to be there at 21 anyway. And even if he wasn't going to be there at 21, I looked at the rest of the board after we took Harmon at 19. Just like in Kiper's draft, Walter Nolan was still there at 21. Kenneth Grant still there at 21. Kenneth Grant didn't go until 30 in this mock draft. I think Walter Nolan might have went at like 28 or something. I can't remember exactly. But they were both still on the board at 21, at least. and they were there later in the draft, later in the first round. I don't think Kenneth Grant made it to the second round like in Kiper's. I think he went, like I said, at 30. But my God, it's terrible. This is an atrocious draft already. Already, we gave up a third round pick, sixth round pick to move up 2 spots for a guy that was gonna be there at 21, most likely. But if not, we had options and defensive line with Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan, guys that you could argue maybe you'd even pick before Derek Harmon, like I did whenever I was reacting to the Kiper mock draft. So terrible start, absolutely terrible start. So we don't have our second round pick because of DK Metcalf. We don't have our third round pick anymore because of this Derek Harmon trade. And then I just looked too at the board after our third round pick to see what would maybe be there in the third round if we didn't make this egregious trade. And what we could have taken in the third round is Dylan Sampson. He was still on the board. Giddens from Kansas State, running back out of Kansas State. Scatterbo was there. Kobe Bryant, cornerback from Kansas. Jalen Lane. He's being projected in the third or fourth round, wide receiver out of Virginia Tech. So those guys were there. Some quality picks were there in the third round. So we could have not done anything according to this guy's board and how he thinks things play out. We could have not done anything, just drafted Kenneth Grant at 21 and got our running back, our additional running back in the third round, like Dylan Sampson or Giddens or someone, by not doing anything. And that would have been a 500 times better draft than what my man's got going right now for the Steelers. And then in the fourth round, we take a guard out of Cincinnati. Not the worst pick. We could use some O-line depth. Yeah, like not terrible, but still, I'd maybe be looking at running back there. I'd maybe be looking at receiver there as a potential like George Pickens replacement, guy you want to have in the wings, guy you want to have in the system. Because again, looking at the board, who is still available? I mean, even quarterback, even a higher end quarterback than what he has us drafting in the fifth round of Brady Cook. Like, come on, that's a joke right there. Will Howard was there in the fourth. Like, Will Howard was there in the fourth. Texas running back Jaden Blue. If we wanted to like double up on the defensive line, JJ, I'm gonna botch his last name. JJ Pegasus from Ole Miss. He was there in the fourth round. I wouldn't have minded that pick. You even had guys like Quinn Ewers, Kyle McCord. I'm not the biggest fan of Kyle McCord, but I would take him over Brady Cook. But like those guys were all there in the fourth that could have been better options than Luke Kandra, guard out of Cincinnati. Nothing against them. Again, we could use the O-line depth, but with us not having a second and third round pick, I probably would have liked running back there, or maybe even, again, just getting another quarterback in-house like a Will Howard, because obviously we're not drafting Shedeur or Dart based off how these picks go in this mock draft. Because even if Rodgers is here or not, we're going to get a quarterback at some point in this draft. Because Skylar Thompson as our 3, that ain't it. So whether we get one in the first or second, or we get one in the third, fourth, or fifth, it's going to happen. And I would prefer Will Howard. I would much prefer Will Howard or Quinn Ewers than Brady Cook in the fifth round in the scenario. And then we don't have, again, our sixth round pick, but he has us taken Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, running back out of Arizona. So that's our running back out of this whole class. As opposed to taking one in the third, as opposed to taking one maybe fourth or fifth, we got one in the seventh. But this guy's not bad. He's not bad. I think that's a decent pick right there. But again, you could look at some of the other guys that were on the board, or at least one of them. Devin Neal out of Kansas was there in the seventh round. Would you rather have Devin Neal than Krosky-Merritt? Maybe. There's a case to be made because Devin Neal is being projected as potentially like a third or fourth, fifth round running back. So this draft was awful. Absolutely awful. I give this an F. I get this is so bad. Like, I'm not going to say now. I did spit a little bit of hyperbole by saying he made us worse in this draft, but I mean, at least we got. I don't know, man. It's so bad. It's so bad. Like we didn't get worse because at least we added Derek Harmon. But relative to the rest of the league and what you're supposed to accomplish when the draft comes around, you're supposed to have a lot more positives than what this mock draft has for the Steelers. There's only one. It's Derek Harmon, but you traded up 2 picks and lost your 3rd rounder and 6th rounder in the process. It's just crazy. It's bad. Like this would have us have the worst draft in the whole league. If you were doing post-draft rankings, we would score 32 out of 32. It's just so bad. Like, how? This guy had to have been a Browns fan or a Bengals fan. Like, this draft is so bad. It is so bad. My God. All right, but anyway, let's move on from that. That's a nightmare scenario draft. I can't even believe. Usually when you do mock drafts, now granted, he had to do it for all the teams in the league. He did a full 7-round mock draft. But usually when you do a mock draft, you go away from him. Even if you didn't like it fully, you're like, okay, I could see the vision here. I could see what you're trying to do. That was just a flat out F. I don't think I've ever graded any of the mock drafts that have gotten sent in from the podcast over the years anything worse than a C. That was just a flat out right F. That was so bad, man. Just so bad. Anyway, let's get to the final topic here. Steelers pre-draft visits. I wanted to go over all the players that have been doing their top 30 visits for the Steelers thus far in the draft process. But before we get into that, because up to this point, we're almost full in terms of the guys that we can have asked to come in for the visit. Like, you only get 30. That's why they call it a top 30 visit. You only get 30. I think we're up to like 22. All the local visits are free, but we're like 22, 23 at this point. But we got some big news that just dropped in regards to these top 30 visits about an hour or two ago from Jerry Dulac. Big time name going to be paying a visit to Pittsburgh in the next couple of days. Shedeur Sanders. Jerry Dulac tweets out, Steelers will continue their QB research when they bring in Shedeur Sanders for a top 30 visit on Thursday, per sources. Sanders considered the number 2 QB prospect in the draft. So my reaction to that is good. Good. Like, I mean, I said yesterday, I did a whole video yesterday talking about how no matter whether or not Rodgers signs here, the Steelers should be seriously considering drafting a quarterback early in this class. I did mention that I think the Steelers are going to draft a quarterback no matter what, but they also should seriously consider drafting a quarterback early, like in the 1st round, no matter whether or not Rodgers signs here or not, because there could be a clear case for a succession plan for Rodgers and why that could benefit the Steelers and the franchise going forward. It's been done before by multiple teams throughout the course of NFL history and has worked out. We could talk about the Chiefs. We could talk about the Packers twice with Rodgers, them drafting Rodgers while Favre was already there, and then them drafting Jordan Love while Aaron Rodgers was there as well. Who else? Joe Flacco with the Ravens. They drafted Lamar Jackson. Phillip Rivers with the Chargers way back in the day. Phillip Rivers sat for a couple years behind Drew Brees. We see that kind of worked out for them. Obviously, Rivers wasn't as good as the other quarterbacks in that class. Wasn't as good as Big Ben. Wasn't as good as Eli Manning. But yeah, there's a case for just investing in the quarterback position. There's a case for having a really talented guy sit behind a Hall of Famer for a season or two and have him get familiar with the system, have him get acclimated to NFL life, and then he's good to go for the next 10, 15 years. That is, if you think the talent's there, if you actually really believe in the guy. You don't just do it to do it, but if you really believe in the player, if the Steelers really believed in Shedeur Sanders and he fell to us and we already had Aaron Rodgers signed, cool. Even if we could use some D-line help, even if we could use an extra running back, the quarterback is the most important position in the NFL, and investing in it heavily, you're not going to get me criticizing it, especially just where the Steelers stand right now. Maybe it's a different story Um, yeah, if it was Big Ben back in like 2018, 2019, just maybe any year you want to bring up about Big Ben, the last however many years, I think it would be different. I would have a different tune. I would be talking about just because you have Big Ben trying to improve the team best as you can around him, trying to give him the best surroundings because we're trying to win a championship. And that's the case for not drafting a quarterback if you have Aaron Rodgers as well. But look at what the Steelers like just trajectory has been over the last like 3 or 4 years. It's different than when we had Big Ben, right? Like all we knew was Big Ben. We've had Big Ben and that consistency for 18 years. Now we've been in this weird spot with quarterback and spinning our tires and kind of like this purgatory of it doesn't seem like we know what we're doing on offense or know how to get the right quarterback or know how to get the right just offense system, whatever it is in place. So like investing in the position over investing in the position, I wouldn't knock it. I definitely wouldn't knock it. Just trying to again, I said this yesterday, throwing darts at a dartboard to try to get something that sticks. And by having an Aaron Rodgers for maybe a year or two and then drafting a guy in the first round, okay. Yeah, I think you're helping your chances to try to find that quarterback for the future. You definitely are. And this is legit, man. This is why I'm happy about us visiting with Shedeur Sanders is because he might actually fall to us. He legitimately might. If you look at the draft order, there's talks about the Browns and Giants not going Shedeur, not going quarterback. Titans are going to go Cam Ward. After that, the only two logical landing spots, unless someone trades up for Shedeur, would be the Saints at 9, but they have Derek Carr back, so you could easily see them passing on Shedeur. And after that, it's us at 21. So if we're already doing visits with Jackson Dart, we're already doing visits with Tyler Shuck and a couple of these other quarterbacks, like why wouldn't we do our due diligence with Shedeur Sanders? At this point, he legitimately could fall to you in the first round, and you want to make sure you're prepared, and you want to make sure you know whether or not he could be a guy for you. I got him at number 2 on my draft big board in terms of quarterbacks. I got him at number 2. I think it's Cam Ward, it's Shedeur Sanders. After that, Jackson Dart. Then you're having conversations between like Will Howard, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck, and then you got like the Quinn Ewers, Kyle McCord tier after that. But Shedeur Sanders may very well be there at 21 if you're the Steelers. And again, it wouldn't be a bad idea to take a quarterback early in this upcoming draft. Just given the state of the team, given where we're at with the quarterback position, where we're at offense, all that stuff, bro, why not? Why not? Whether Rodgers is here or not, why not? So I'm happy about this, man. If Shedor's there, that's gonna be that would be hard to pass up. I'm not even gonna front, man. Like if Shedor's there, even if some of these other defensive tackles are there, quarterback is that position, man. Most important position in football. You could argue most important position in sports. Seriously. So to have a guy waiting in the wings that you draft in the first round that you obviously believe in with the talent and all that stuff, sitting behind a Hall of Famer. And if Rodgers isn't here, it obviously makes even more sense to have a guy competing with Mason in his rookie season. To have Mason here, obviously the guy that's familiar with the Steelers, familiar with the program and stuff, as the kind of like that bridge guy. But then you have your first rounder. You have your guy that you invested heavily in by taking him at 21. And you see if he could beat out Mason year one. If not, you know that's going to be your future. You know you're going to be giving him a couple seasons at it to prove if he could be the guy. But yeah, I would definitely be for the Shedeur Sanders pick at 21 if he falls, and he very well may fall. Outside of a trade up, man, there's only one team. Because I don't know, man. I mean, the Raiders maybe. have Shedeur sitting behind Geno Smith, but he just signed that lucrative contract. I feel like Geno and Pete Carroll, they're out for revenge. They're really trying to win now. And not saying the Steelers aren't trying to win now. Again, like if we get Aaron Rodgers, and we know how Tom and we know how this organization operates, they want to give themselves the best chance to win year in, year out. But we also got to be honest with how these last like 3 or 4 seasons have played out at quarterback and on the offensive side of things. So, like, and going back to my other, this whole show is kind of tying in a way. Going back to my other point, whenever I was talking about running back and defensive tackle in the first round, we do got on paper starters at those positions, so we could afford to pass on them in round 1. We could afford to do it. Wouldn't be the end of the world if we passed on them. Sucks that we don't have a second round pick. We'd have to wait for the third round, but I think you get my point here. We can afford to draft one of these dudes if it's a Shedeur Sanders at 21. How if it's Jackson Dart even too. But outside the Saints, I don't see it. Like Rams, they just brought Stafford back. Do they want to get a successor in the building? Would they want to trade up, go out of their way to get Shedeur Sanders, or would they just rather chill there if a Dart falls to them, or if Shuck's there? And Shuck's gonna be there probably in the first round at 26, but maybe they trade back. Maybe they want to get their guy in the second round. I just because even the guys after, even in terms of a trade up team, what teams are going out of their way to trade up? I don't know. Like the Jets aren't taking Shedeur at 7. I don't see that. I think they gave Fields the keys. I think they gave him some assurances. Bears got Williams, Niners, Purdy, Cowboys. Cowboys. I don't see the Cowboys though. Dak with that contract, and this wouldn't even be a trade up scenario. That would be the Cowboys just chilling there and taking Shedeur Sanders. But they got the Dak contract, and they just traded for Joe Milton to be the backup. Dolphins with Tua, no. Colts, Danny Dimes and Anthony Richardson. They still got Anthony Richardson on the roster, a guy that they picked top 5 overall. Falcons, nope. They got Penix. Cardinals, Kyler Murray, no. Bengals, Burrow, no. Seahawks, no. Sam Darnold. Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield, no. Broncos, Bo Nix. And then even after the Steelers, any of these teams in terms of trading up, I don't see it. I don't. Packers, Jordan Love, Texans, Stroud, Vikings, McCarthy, Rams would be the one, but they still got Stafford. I don't think they're stressing or going out of their way to try to trade up to get Shedeur to be the backup for a couple more seasons. Commanders, Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Lions, Ravens, no. Yeah, I guess the trade up teams you'd have to worry about are the Browns or Giants coming up from the early second round. That would be it. They would make their pick at 2 or 3, trade back up into the top 20. So, yeah, they'd probably be losing out on a ton of future picks to do that. Future picks or even the rest of the draft for this year. Yeah, they would definitely have to give up some assets to pull off something like that. But yeah, that's about it for the show. I did want to go over the rest of the pre-draft visits. Like, here's the whole list. Shout out to Steelers Depot. They do a good job on tracking this stuff. But Shedeur Sanders is the highlight. That's the main name here. But if you look at all the guys that are coming into Pittsburgh, it just makes sense with what we're looking at, what people are projecting the Steelers to take early, and just what they're going to be looking at overall in this upcoming draft. You got some of the quarterbacks there. You got a long list of running backs that are looking to be taken day 2, that round 2, 3, maybe even 4 range. Receivers. Now, this is the interesting part. There are 2 or 3 interesting positions or guys that we're visiting with here, and it's receivers. All those receivers outside of Savion Williams, he's being projected like round 3, round 4. No Higgins and Golden. Golden's arguably the number 1 receiver in this class. I mean, he's going to go. I don't know if he's even going to be there for the Steelers at 21. If he's there at 21, actually, that's one position. That's one guy I would be pumped about us taking that's not a defensive tackle, running back, or quarterback is Matthew Golden. I think that dude's a stud. I think he is the number one receiver in this class, rightfully so. But then Jalen Nolan Higgins, those guys are round two play, maybe even late first, round two receivers. And we don't have, again, we don't have that round two pick. So maybe that trade down is an option. We trade down and maybe it isn't defensive tackle. We trade down to pick. We trade down and take a receiver, and we take a defensive tackle with the pick that we gain by trading down. Maybe that's a play. But I think that's intriguing. Then also Nick Emmanwori from South Carolina, safety. Like he's arguably the top safety in this draft. Visiting with him, that would be an interesting pick at 21. And then those two corners too in the secondary. No one's thinking like secondary is the most pressing need, but Trey Amos and Thomas out of Florida State, those guys are like second round cornerbacks. Again, we don't have a second round pick, but that would be, I think, a luxury pick by taking either of one of those guys. But then you see we were visiting with about 5 or 6 defensive linemen there, the local visits, Gavin Bartholomew. I wouldn't mind taking him. I know the Pitt players. He's a tight end out of Pitt. I think he'd be a solid guy to get late in this draft, maybe like round 7 or something. Ben Sauls, he's a good kicker too. But we got Boswell, so we don't really have to worry about him. Donovan McMillan, he's a pretty good safety. Wyatt Millam from West Virginia, offensive tackle. Don't know much out of him, but those are the 4 local visits. Those don't count against the top 30 visit quota. I think for the most part, the visits make sense. Outside of the receivers and a couple of those secondary players, I think it's kind of chalk as to what you would expect the Steelers to be doing their due diligence on for this upcoming draft. Receiver, I'm telling you, Matthew Golden, that would be an awesome round 1 pick. Not even gonna front about that. But that's it for today's show. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be back tomorrow, 6:00, and who knows if Rodgers is gonna sign. Stay chilling and peace.